Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we've got Adrian of Kokoro Health here to discuss flow and what holistic functional practices look like. There's a lot to unpack and uncover. I'm so excited to dive in and learn so much more, so let's get right to it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adrian.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have you here because up until this point, this podcast has talked a lot about drinks, as it should, because it's Mocktails with Marina. But the thing about it is there's always a functional, holistic element to everything. And I think it's really cool for our listeners to dive deeply into the concept of flow today because, we've got someone we've got so much request for this, is what I'm trying to say. I've heard from multiple industries, multiple businesses, whether they're new to business or have been an entrepreneur for 10 years. Sometimes we just get ourselves kind of stuck in the process, right? Like we're so deeply in our mission that we kind of almost like lose ourselves to the mission. And, you know, this is a topic that I think, Adrian, you are perfect to discuss with us today, especially in the context of work-life balance. So I want to start off by asking you, what is Kokoro Health?
So, I think Kokoro Health in a nutshell. For the one is just the past work I've been doing, I guess, at least professionally since 2018 since I started it. But nonetheless, it's really just a an experience that I've been developing ever since I guess I got the idea to start my own business in terms of supporting those who are always, I guess, in charge or leading other people, yet they struggle to do that for themselves, right? I feel like a lot of times when we are in this helper role, we tend to neglect our own needs and, I guess, efforts to support those who are in need. And as a byproduct, we literally limit the ability for us to actually provide whatever service that may be, whether it be for one like social work, whether it be a coach, whether it just be a helping hand, whether it just be like a leading member of a family, right? But nonetheless, like we're always in this role and we're always thinking about other people. Yeah, we're not really taking the time to pour that energy back into our own cups for us to continue doing that path, right? And but nonetheless, a lot of it's just been an accumulation of different experiences that I've had from my social work experience, from my personal training, from behavioral coaching, from just life in general. And but nonetheless, it's really about focusing on yourself as the individual and really tapping into your own sense of the inner power of taking the I guess that steering wheel of controlling the trajectory that you want in your life in order to create the life that you actually want for yourself. And nonetheless, it's really about doing that, really about simplifying those steps. And it's really about just being the best version of yourself, the best you can be.
It sounds so simple, but yet it's not a simple like I don't even want to use the word simple, but as in like we all want to be our best selves, right? So we look at our life choices day by day and say, okay, well, did I make the best of my choices today? What could I have done to do better? But at some point, there's a blind spot, right? But on the other hand, some of us who have gone through life who have, maybe met some characters may have a hard time trusting people to tell us about our blind spots. And maybe sometimes we get a little prickly about it, even. And so we have a hard time kind of diving in. And it seems like something that, like, we can brush under the rug for so long until it totally interrupts our flow. So that being said, I laugh because you have to in life to keep it light when, you think about the times that kind of grind you to a halt. So, Adrian, what would you say to someone out there who's kind of feeling that way? Like, they're like, hey, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying, I have this business I'm working on. But unfortunately, I used to have a business coach or a life coach or a therapist or a past mentor or boss that really let me down. So now I don't know how to find the right mentor or know who to trust. What would you say to someone like that who's really, really trying to open up to the process?
Gotcha. Well, for one thing, that's been like in my own life and also what's been coming up in my head when you were saying that. is just, I guess, this phrase or this mantra that came to me around when I was 23 years old. That is, wellness isn't easy, but it doesn't have to be hard. And pretty much what that means is we don't have to overcomplicate the things that are happening in our lives. Yes, like we all have a story, right? Whether it be filled with a bunch of trauma or maybe it is filled with something different, right? Nonetheless, like we have this story that we are given in our life, whether it be the one that we're writing, whether it be, the family that we're born into. But nonetheless, it's really about figuring out what you need, right? And also just being open to the different experiences that you are facing. And even though we might have been jaded in the past with, past bosses, past relationships, again, going back to the whole family aspect of our upbringing and whatnot. But nonetheless, it's our duty or our responsibility to, I guess, take responsibility for ourselves, for the actions that we decided to put ourselves in, or more like the environments we put ourselves in, and take it as a learning opportunity. Because if we don't do that, we're always in this victim mode mindset. Therefore, we're always blaming other people, right? And I guess in essence, we're giving that power to those experiences, to those people, rather than going back to what I was saying earlier, pointing back into ourselves, right? What could we learn? Like, what points of wisdom, what nuggets of wisdom could we develop from, said experience, whether it be good, bad, or ugly? And what can we do? Like emphasis on the do part, because I think that's what a lot of people mess up on. They can learn so many different curriculums, so many different concepts, but nonetheless, if you're not actually applying or implementing those things that you learned, you're at the same exact spot where you started, right? Maybe a little bit more knowledgeable, but if you think about the word knowledge, it's literally the edge of knowing, right? So if we put that in perspective, we always have to be in the state of action, right? That's why when people are in that state of action, like even going back into, I guess, physical movement, the physical act of moving is what really gets you to that higher level of health status, of fitness, or whatever the case may be. And it's really about that action that we take and taking that responsibility that we have for ourselves in order to create that life that we want for ourselves. So again, ultimately, it's really about you taking that action on a daily, daily, daily steps, for the lack of a better word. But nonetheless, taking those steps, putting into work, learning what you need to learn, and then implementing it. Pretty much that cycle.
Beautiful. See, you can get hurt in life, but that doesn't mean that has to be the end of the book. It's just the end of a chapter. There's other things on the other side. Now, I'm curious about some previous chapters for you. Is there any mentor you have ever had in life that really sticks out that you're like, I wouldn't be the person I am today without this mentor?
I think definitely. Just to, I guess, add a bit of, I guess, background to my story, especially for those who don't know me at all. Um, so at least to keep it relatively simple, my career path or my idea of what I wanted to be when I was a kid was an engineer. Like no intention to be in this wellness space, no intention to be a personal trainer, a wellness coach, behavior coach, a social worker, all these different things that I've done so far. My entire intention since being a kid was to be an engineer. So I literally went to a math and science school, did my thing, graduated number one. I went to school expecting to be an engineer, studying physics all the way up to quantum dynamics, thermodynamics, and whatnot, just to get to this pivotal moment in my life where I felt this wasn't actually meant for me. Like whatever this trajectory that I was on was a good foundation just to learn, I guess, a different layer to, I guess, understanding the world that we live in, at least as a physical level. And it's that person that really helped me with, I guess, with the transition of my life was my health and fitness teacher in high school. Because I met him when I was 14. And at that time in my life, I wasn't really, I guess, in the best state of health, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. Like I had very low self-esteem. I come from a family where physical fitness isn't really talked about. And a lot of it is just a lot of sedentary lifestyle, pretty much. And let alone the spirit aspect of it, a lot of it is not necessarily a healthy way to express the spirit. But nonetheless, meeting this individual in high school, at least I remember this one moment when I was working out in his class, because he taught a lot about like more foundational movements, really about safety, really set down this foundation where like safety was the most important. It was never about ego lifting. It was never about, I guess, stroking the ego in any way. It was really about safety. And I remember one moment where I was at this breaking point within this workout and I kept pushing, right? I trusted myself at that moment. I trusted my body. I trusted my mind. I trusted my spirit that I could continue on, right? And from there, kind of something just clicked, right? This little shift of perspective, like, wow, I am capable of doing things. Well, I am capable of, I guess, breaking through these limiting beliefs. And that was like that first little domino, right? And then fast forward, going back into like I was studying engineering and all that, I meet my health and fitness teacher again. This time he had quit his job as being a teacher at the high school that I went to and started his own CrossFit gym. And at that point in my life, I can see myself, I was kind of going back into that pattern where, like, all right, I'm being sedentary again. My mindset is getting very negative or very dark. And I needed to change. So I hit him up again, like, hey, I know you got this gym going on. Can I join it? So I joined it, do the workouts. Kind of feels like I'm back in high school again, feeling a bit more like positive and whatnot. But this time I'm a little bit older, I'm more of an adult now, I'm about 19, 20 years old. And again, I'm at this pivotal moment where like I don't know if engineering is my pathway. I don't know if what I've been thinking my entire life, this was actually meant for me. So I sat down with him, and this conversation was what truly like made me switch my entire career path, or my entire, I guess, purpose essentially. So I sat down with them, just explaining a bit what I'm just explaining right now about like my indecisiveness, not showing this is for me, not really feeling aligned with this. And he brought up two perspectives. So for one, like people who are always chasing that dollar, right? Always going after that dollar. If you think about it, you're always going after something. Therefore, it's always at reach, but never truly attainable. However, if you're living in your passion, living within that sense of purpose that you create and have for yourself, the dollar will go to you, right? And that whole perspective switched in my brain. I was like, whoa, like I never thought about that. Because for one, engineering for the most part is a very promising career financially. And switching over into the wellness space is a bit of a, I guess, a pay cut, at least from typical, I guess, societal standards, right? And when I did that, like literally that day, I looked into a wellness exercise program at ASU, and I switched that day after doing 3 years of engineering and physics, because I felt way more aligned. I can see myself actually doing this type of work in terms of just helping people, because that was my main emphasis anyway. I just wanted to help someone or help people in any way I can. And I thought engineering was going to be that. However, it wasn't, you know. And from seeing this program and I guess seeing that or feeling that spark of, I guess, inspiration, or just seeing, I guess, a vision into the future, what it could be, it kind of just tipped that next domino. And therefore, I got certified at 19, being one of the probably the youngest certified CrossFit coaches in the world, to eventually getting into social work, being 21, working in groups of kids, eventually going into behavioral coaching, working one-on-one with kids and families, being a high needs case manager, being the person coordinating the services, from recommending, therapy, going to professional meetings with lawyers, doctors, courts, you name it, pretty much being that individual to really facilitate the services and guide families and children into a better state of wellness. And then coming into my own realization that I can do this in a different way than what these people are doing. And therefore going back into like that initial talk with my teacher that I had, I'm living my passion, right? And these things, these opportunities are coming more to me, from being interviewed on magazines to being on this podcast, being on other different podcasts, to starting my own podcast. But nonetheless, from living within my passion, more opportunities started to come my way. My purpose is being more lived, not feeling as stagnant, not feeling like I am my own personal burden, but more so I'm committing to myself, committing to my daily actions, and just being free essentially. But I think that's kind
Wow.
of where I'm at with that.
That's so cool to me to think that, all it takes is a conversation. Like one conversation here and then one conversation years later, but to be able to like look back and see how profound those moments were to like put you on an entirely different life trajectory, it just goes to really double down on what you're saying about passion. I remember I'd always try to find mentors because I remember learning young, like you never want to be the smartest person in the room. So I always tried to be the dumbest. So no matter what my passions were, I always tried to find whichever coach I liked the most. And I always wanted to get private lessons or like go to office hours, depending on whatever context it is. And it's so interesting how like our passion can be our compass in these things because, there's right as you were telling those stories, I had two people pop into my head and they were very inspiring in different ways, one positive, one really negative. And the positive one, when I was early on in my circus career, there's one lady named Zoroya Judd who had won the first ever, or not won, but she was in the first ever world pole competition. And then she had won the fall or the next year, I believe, something like that. But anyway, she's just a total badass. And I went, I saved every penny I had for so long. And I literally remember not even eating dinner sometimes in college just so that I could like afford to go out and train with her one time. And uh, that experience changed everything for me because she told me to, you know, don't worry and be so hard on the things you don't have control over, but just making the best of what choices you have. And that like got me off the ground with my career. Like literally after that day, like that was the day I became a professional. And then that same year, because like I said, I was in college, that was also one of my final semesters of college ever. And I was studying math for no career reason. I just liked it. And, I had a TA that I would constantly go to every single office hour because that's just the way I learn. Like I need to learn in conversation. That's why I love these podcasts and getting to talk to people. And, I remember asking this TA that had me as his student for multiple semesters. I was like, okay, cool. So, like, I'm about to graduate. So, should I go to grad school next? Like, what should I do? And he just kept telling me, no, like, don't do that. Like, it's not going to be good for you. And being super vague and like emo about it. Now, years later, obviously, like, I'm very grateful for this advice. I'm glad I didn't go that route. And I see why he said that because all of my math people who graduated around the same time as me that continued in academia are like not doing well mentally. Let's just leave it there. So, the whole point of that story is like, it's crazy how some conversations can be incredibly positive and some can be, they don't feel right, but it's just as valuable because it helps you see like, ooh, that really wasn't my passion. Like, I don't like those icky feelings that came from that whole vibe there. And I think that speaks a lot to flow. Like, it's so hard to flow in anything that you're not passionate about. So that leads me to my next juicy question. What is your definition of flow?
That is a very great question. So I guess my definition kind of ties into another mantra. For one, just during COVID, I had a lot of, I guess, higher self chats, like this literally hearing my own voice, speaking some wisdom to myself. And one thing that came up to me is that freedom is movement without hesitation. And that ties into, I guess, my definition of flow, because when we're not really hesitating in the moment and we're just moving with whatever life throws at us, whether it be good, bad, or ugly, that is flow, right? Same thing when, you're in an actual fight. I did a boxing for a bit and I still kind of do it now. But nonetheless, like someone throws a punch at you, you roll with it or you take the punch, but you do your best to not really feel the landing of the punch. And you're just literally dancing with this individual for X amount of minutes. And nonetheless, like you're flowing in the moment because there's nothing choreographed. There's nothing that you can really predict other than just kind of, I guess, reading the body language and just kind of adjusting in the split seconds when they throw that punch and doing your best to counter, to do defense, and also be on your offense and whatnot. I guess very similar to life if you view life as more of a dance, whether it be a combative dance, whether it be, I guess, pole dancing, depending on your state of life and whatnot. But nonetheless, like whatever dance you choose to, I guess, engage in, feel it as a dance, right? Life is gonna be one way one day, it's gonna be another thing another day. And if we can be very dynamic in that way, where we can, I guess, adopt new dancing styles or just new ways to deal about life, and literally just moving without hesitation, and we can be, I guess, in a higher state of freedom, higher state of flow. Therefore, when challenge do arise, we can handle it in a better and more healthier way.
I love that movement. Flow is freedom. Wait, freedom is movement without
Without
hesitation.
hesitation. Yeah.
There it is. Yes, I love that so much because that hesitation is where like that lack of kind of grace comes into play. And I feel like, when we finally shake out the nerves or the imposter syndrome or, whatever's kind of getting in our way and we're in our flow and we're feeling good, it feels really good. And when those hesitations come up, I remember learning that, you know, when facing a hesitation in dance specifically, like from the theatrical's perspective of someone sitting in the audience and you are on a stage, like what do people see in that in that like artistic context of a hesitation? Sometimes that hesitation, when it's intentional, is so powerful. It can like you can hear a pin drop and it's profound and it's beautiful to see. But when the hesitation you can tell is poorly timed, it does the same thing. It's the same emotional response, just on the other side of the coin where, everybody's heart drops for a different reason. They're like, oh my goodness. And in those moments, back when I would teach, I taught at a pole studio for a very long time. And then after that, I taught workshops and then some online courses as well. But by the end of my like online, like the end of my dance career in general, I kind of stopped teaching specific movements because I thought that was super boring. Like I was like, I'm not here to watch anyone work out. I'm here to teach you how to dance and flow. So I was like, hey, if you want to learn tricks, go somewhere else. We're here to flow. We're here to dance and find that movement and that grace. And, anytime people would have a hard time and they'd hit those hesitations, I always remember that we would practice falling. So I'd pull the crash mats out and say, okay, why are you hesitating? Like, what comes to your mind? And we would literally start to play it out as if it was like just this ridiculously dramatic theater class. So we'd stack the mats up really high so you could pretend to faint ridiculously and fall backwards, but you're caught by something. So we would do these exercises where we would turn the lights pretty low, have the crash mats out, and you would like walk up to it. And then right when you hear a hesitation in the music, you like pause, make like a ridiculous face, whatever your facial expression for that was. And then you would fall back into it. And then like in that moment, for some reason, I can't tell you why this worked, but every time we would do that, everyone would get out of their heads, and all of a sudden, all of their hesitations turned into the graceful kind rather than the like secondhand embarrassment kind of hesitation as watching from the perspective of the audience. So, not saying that there's any bad way to dance or anything. I'm just saying I taught how to be a professional entertainer. So that was the context. But that all being said, I'm curious, that's just the dance context, but in your own words, how would you say, if someone's hesitating in their flow, like they're in it, but then they sometimes fall out of it, what's your best advice for, getting rid of those little hiccups and just, or maybe not even getting rid of them, but going with the flow?
I got you. That's a very good question because it's hard, right?
Hmm.
Because life is gonna be life, and sometimes it's gonna really throw shit at you, for the lack of a better word, and throw you off your groove. But nonetheless, I think when life does hit you, then you just got to remember the why. Pretty sure, like you've heard this before, Marina, and possibly whoever is listening to this recording. If you remember your why and really and actually really like hone in on that why, like why you're doing the things that you're doing, like why do you get up, in the morning to go to work if you work? Like, why are you an entrepreneur? Why are you a family member? Or why are you like a head of a household? Why are you this? Why are you that? Right? If you really get into the why and figure out what or why that is, and figure out what that genuine reason is or that genuine response is, when life does provide those opportunities to learn, right? We can remember. We can remember those moments of why we decided to, choose to be on this path of being an entrepreneur, or why we chose to be in this wellness space, why we chose to even show up on this podcast on May 10th, right? Like, we can be doing so many different things, but we chose because we had a reason to, our reason to really share our worlds, to be a light within the society, to be a light for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, all we can do is be a reflection of our true essence that's coming from within us, right? So the more that we step into that why, the more we step into our true authentic selves. Therefore, like, again, when things do arise in our life, we can, I guess, remain sovereign, remain grounded into what we're doing, even if it does feel rocky, even if it does feel like we don't want to continue on anymore. And if we can establish that, therefore we can establish different, I guess, not sub outlets, but possibly, I guess, lack of a better word, coping skills, or even just ways to navigate these challenges. Because if we don't, and even though we have a strong foundation of a why, we still may be pushed off the ledge and like relapse into whatever our previous lifestyle was. For example, if it's like very sedentary and you're trying to get into physical activity, you might just go back into a sedentary lifestyle. And that's completely fine, as long as you acknowledge that you relapse. And that means that you can get back into that cycle of change, right? But nonetheless, we have to have that awareness. We have to have the awareness of our deep and genuine why. And also just create these, I guess the word is subsystems for us to navigate the challenges, right? When things do come arise, what can we do in that moment to flow with it? What can we do to reach out for support from a professional, from a family member, from a trusted loved one, whatever the case may be? And nonetheless, just doing your best to just navigate, right? Do your best to go through the journey. Do your best to just commit to yourself. At the end of the day, like, this is your life. This is the only one that we have as far as we know. And if we're not really stepping into what our life can truly be, I guess I will challenge you to figure out, why is that? Like, why are you choosing this? And why not choose something a little bit different, something that's more ideal for you? And I guess I'll leave it as that.
Mm. Why is a good question. Figuring out your North Star so that on those darkest, heaviest of nights, you can still see where you're going.
Correct.
That being said, you know, I feel like sometimes when our star, maybe there's a cloudy night, and for whatever reason, we're having a hard time remembering. Sometimes, not all the time, in certain contexts, of course, all the things here, but sometimes it can be really nice to just hear an inspiring story of someone who got through something incredibly difficult. So it just gives you a little bit more hope that it's possible for you too. So I'm curious if you have any stories of whether it's anyone you've worked with or just a friend, an anonymous friend um, y- an inspiring story of transformation of someone who didn't have flow, didn't have that balance in life and was struggling, but then came to the other side and is now thriving.
Definitely have a lot of them from my own personal to the people that I've worked with. But one person in particular, won't mention any names, but it was a kid I used to work with. And to keep it simple, kind of imagine kind of like the Harry Potter story. Harry Potter story where Harry Potter was raised by his aunt and his uncle. So very
Mm.
similar, but also he was treated very poorly by them. Kind of like a second class child, if that's even a phrase, but nonetheless, like, his mother passed away when he was 7. His father was not in the picture. He was in the system, and his aunt and his uncle were taking care of him, and they were full-blown narcissists. And not so much in terms of what people think narcissists are in terms of social media definition, uh if you know what a true narcissist is, which I think you do, Marina,
Mm.
you know what they are. If you don't know, I highly recommend seeking out some definitions or a video of some sort to really figure out what that is. Again, figure out what a true narcissist is, and you may see them around more often than you think. And you also may see people that you thought were narcissists aren't truly narcissistic. But nonetheless, that was like a little sub story. But imagine that environment, very narcissistic, parental figures. Kid was lost, mother died when he was 7 in the system. And nonetheless, he was not following anything from being 7 years old all the way until I met him when he was about 16 years old. So about 9 years of being in the system, but always being a manipulator, working the system to his favor, just telling people what they want to hear. And to the point where when I was a high needs case manager, the person facilitating the services, this kid popped into my world. And I haven't even met him yet, right? I just met the aunt and the uncle, and they're giving me their spiel about how bad of a kid he is. He's a manipulator, blah, 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 blah. And my mindset, at least at that time when I was in that social worker role, taking everyone's perspective, but be completely unbiased as possible. At least also on a personal note, I like to meet people like as them, right? Rather than hearing what people have to say about them. I feel that's the better way of getting to know people when they tell you their story, their truth. And obviously, if they lie, that's on them, right? You can lie to everyone else, but you can't really lie to yourself. But nonetheless, hearing the aunt and uncle tell their story about how bad of a kid he is, a manipulator, da 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 da. And at this point, I was given this case, and I was told by my superiors I have to do this paperwork to submit to get him into this boys' school, pretty much like a behavioral school for boys. So I do this, and then I literally send him over before even meeting him. And at this point, he's by himself in a completely foreign environment, never been here. Like, he literally brought himself to this moment of his life where his behaviors got so out of hand where he had to be literally removed from the home and placed in a completely different environment where it's way stricter, way more regulations, a lot of different things, right? Things you probably could imagine and some things you probably couldn't. But nonetheless, he's there. I meet him for the first time. He's just like this, at least in my opinion, this dorky little kid. He's pretty tall. He's like my height, but he's like one of those, you know, I don't know, try to be cool kids, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I meet him and he's alone, right? At this point, I think he's realizing a bit about what his life or how his life led to this moment, right? Um, and he has a lot of work to do. But talking to him, being literally the only person on his team because he couldn't really, I guess, stay on a team with like therapists, with other different programs and whatnot. Because no one really got like literally like connected with them. It was always like pretty much by the book. People that literally just study social work in college and try to apply whatever they learned within the field, which is perfectly fine. But I didn't study any social work in college, so my perspective was a little bit different. And I also happened to grow up in the neighborhood that I was helping the kids in. So I understood the environment, I understood the culture, I just understood him, right? I understood the kids. So I met him literally as myself in, of course, a professional way for the most part. And through that, like, you can tell whatever guards, whatever perspective that he had about someone trying to be a helper role in his life started going down. We started bonding over poetry. We started bonding over chess, started bonding over physical activity to the point where he literally started getting, I think, up to like 10 people on his team consistently, from a drug program facilitator to a therapist to getting him on antidepressants or something of the sorts, to having, I think, a DCS provider, like different people, right? That are all here to support him. And he was able to willingly receive it. And this was the actual pivotal moment where I really felt that we were all like literally getting to him in a very positive way, where we used to do these things called CFT meetings. So child family team meetings. So where everyone on the team, from the child to whoever the parental figures are, to whoever else is on the team, myself, other high needs case managers, therapists, and whatnot. And also keep this in mind that he already been emancipated by his aunt and his uncle. So he's a ward of the state at this point. So those individuals are no longer in his life, not making an effort to be in his life anymore. And at this point in his life, at this meeting, he was kind of like nervous for some reason. And it's already been like maybe 6, 7, 8 months into the services of being under my care and whatnot. But he was really nervous for some reason. Like he was like fidgeting, jumping around. And then when it came to starting the meeting, he had something to say. So he went into his pocket, pulled something out, and threw this cartridge battery, so pretty much to smoke weed, on the table. And he told everyone, I'm done. Like he's been using while in the school for whatever amount of time, and he's ready to make the change. He's ready to be different. He's ready to take his life a bit more seriously, because he's at the point where he wasn't going to be able to graduate high school. He was at the point where he could literally go to like a different level of behavioral care as an adult if he doesn't improve. So at this point, that was his stand, or his, I guess, flagpole in the ground, where like he's ready to be a different person, to be a different version of himself. And everyone just got caught off guard. We're like, wow, like I was shook that day. I was like, damn, like I was not expecting that at all. And from that moment, for one, we got him out of that boys' school, got him to a group home. He graduated high school. He got out of services. He got off of the meds. He no longer needs them. We found his dad, his biological father, in Florida, right? Got him back to reconnected, moved back out there. And now he's, I think, maybe 21, 22, something like that. He's has a girlfriend, he's in school, he has his own car, he's making his own money, figuring out life essentially, right? And that was way different compared to where he could have been, right? He could have just been another junkie on the street. He could have been just another person caught up in the system, but this time a prison system. But he chose differently, just because he wanted something different for his life. And I remember that story quite a bit. For one, I just have him on social media, and it's cool to just check on him, check in on him. And yeah, it's a cool story just to tell people, because I saw this legit transformation from this boy turning more into a young man. And as one of my favorite stories, and one of my favorite people to talk about.
Mm, the power of connection. It's crazy how, everybody is going through something. I heard this phrase the other day that was like, your suffering doesn't make you special, it makes you human. Because no matter you know, what class someone's in, what part of the world they're in, we all have our struggles and all have something to get through. And I feel like the difference between getting out of our struggles and, getting stuck in the cycle of our struggles, at least from where I'm standing, it tends to come down to connection. Anytime I talk to Tyler, my husband, who, we like to talk a lot about what it takes to help people, you know, really dive into a community and not get stuck in lonely land, because when we're alone, that's where addiction is. That's where temptation for like bad decision making can be, because when you only have yourself to take care of and you aren't feeling good about yourself for any reason, there's not a lot of motivation to feel like doing better. But the moment we have someone who cares about us, or is in connection with us, or that we care about them, all of a sudden now there's way more motivation to get something done, way more motivation to make a change, and more energy too, because two people working on something is more than twice as powerful as just one person working alone. It's so beautiful to hear stories of connection. And as we wrap up this episode, I just think about, you know, after all of the quarantines that happened with COVID and kind of reassimilating into the world, because people took different time frames to do that, I think that there still are long-term effects that we're experiencing now. Even those of us who did go out into the world and didn't, get maybe we lived in states that were a little bit more free or, lived in the country where you could just be a little differently. Even those people experience life differently now. Everybody does. So, all of that being said, what's your favorite place, like type of place to find connection in this post-COVID world? Like, what do you do when you're feeling, kind of stuck in your head, or you want to just go out and, you know, increase the quality of your connections and, increase your community reach?
I like that question because I've literally been intensely building on that. Um, so something I've been doing consistently since the beginning of the year is doing a like I guess a monthly nature retreat just by going hiking, and I've been inviting just different people within my own personal network and community, from the gym that I coach at, from people within my so called my Kokoro Health community, to my family members, and yeah, just getting out in nature any way I can, just being out in the sun, being out in the dirt. I like the dirt, like to be dirty in a good way, I guess. um, yeah, and that's literally how I guess, been navigating post COVID times. Even during COVID too, I was hitting the bike. I was cycling about 180 miles a week, so about 60 miles per ride, 3 times a week. And I was literally seeing parts of Arizona or parts of Phoenix that I didn't even knew existed. Like just literally riding on the canals, like all the way from downtown Phoenix to the Arizona Cardinal Stadium, and past that into North Phoenix to Tempe to the riverbanks to everything. It was just like, wow, like a lot of these things are connected. And I wouldn't have known this if I didn't just go out there and explore and just ride and just move, right, without any hesitation. And I think the more that we can just do that in general, just go out and just explore, be adventurous, let that inner child just, I don't know, take in the world again with fresh eyes. The more that, for one, we can meet beautiful people, beautiful souls. From like, for one, just meeting you and Tyler at Lacuna during COVID, right? I had no idea that Lacuna, or at least the people within Lacuna, were gonna be such a positive influence in my life until it just started to happen, right? And
Mm.
so on and so forth. Yeah. And so on and so forth, right? Like just the different people you meet, from just being an explorer, being adventurous, to the opportunities that arise, to, I guess, new family being built. So I think that would be kind of like where I'm at with that question.
I love the way you answered that because not only did you mention that people are connections, but the connection to nature, if you aren't, sometimes if we're in a more depressive state where there's like low energy, maybe you feel disconnected, but you're not ready to like go make a new friend at a kava bar. Like that's too much energy, like connecting with nature or connecting with yourself on a bike ride to like literally make connections in your head of the city that you live in, just going down different streets you haven't seen. Like you never know what's around the bend, so you can't be anxious. You don't know what's there. Like you have nothing to do but explore. And that's the beauty of connection. There's so many different ways to do that and feel connected wherever you're at. So you can meet that connection wherever you're at. Thank you so much for this amazing episode. And I have one final question because it wouldn't be Mocktails with Marina if I didn't ask you one beverage related question. I'll keep it nice and easy for you. I'm just curious what your favorite non-alcoholic drink is.
Water.
Yes.
You know anything about me, I always have at least a gallon of water. I'm just walking around with it, drinking it. And yeah, that's one of my favorite ones, and probably one of the only ones I typically drink. Yeah.
Yes. Good reminder that the best mocktail on planet Earth is water. Just drink some water. By the time we get to the end of this episode, I hope you've made it to your kitchen, dear listener, and you're pouring yourself a glass of water right now. Maybe picking one up at the corner store. Do something good for yourself.
Hell yeah.
Thank you so much, Adrian. And as we close up this episode, I just wanted to give a very fun announcement. Adrian is hosting the Kokoro Warrior course on the Functional Flow app. So, do you mind giving us the quick little spiel about what that is?
Will do. So pretty much, if you have any intention to just change your habits in any way, or are struggling with doing that, This program is designed for you. It helps you identify your strengths, a bit of your weaknesses, and a bit of that inner light to really help you create, I guess, the life that you want for yourself. So if that's something that you truly want, I recommend going onto the Functional Flow app, downloading it, and checking out the course.
Yay. Well, thank you so, so much for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
And everyone listening, thank you so much for being here today. As always, if you have any questions for myself or Adrian, feel free to send me an email, hello@marinamars.com. The Functional Flow app and the Kokoro Warrior course will have the links in the description as well, so you can go ahead and click those. And, I just hope you have a great rest of your week. As always, let me know if you need anything.